take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
CannabisRadio.com presents The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
Hey, this is great, man.
Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Tuesday, September 27th, 2016, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Welcome to the show. I hope you're having a great day, and I hope that you got a chance to watch whatever you want to call it, the debate that happened last night on CNN, the first presidential debate of the 2016 election season, pitted Secretary Hillary Clinton against Donald. I don't know if you noticed this. I talk for a living, and so I'm really interested in communication and speech and how we interact with one another and framing, of course. And I got to say, from just politics aside, from a framing perspective, Hillary Clinton kicked Donald's ass last night. And notice how I said that. Hillary Clinton, not once last night, addressed Donald Trump as Mr. Trump. 28 times she addressed Donald Trump, she called him Donald. By comparison's sake, Donald Trump addressed Mrs. Clinton 22 times as Secretary Clinton and 8 times as Hillary. Definitely a calculated move on her part to diminish Donald Trump's standing, to emasculate the Trump brand, to make him a petulant, bratty little kid named Donald. It was just beautiful. And she probably knew he'd have been counseled to call her Mrs. Clinton or Secretary Clinton so he could appear all serious and presidential. So he couldn't respond with his, crooked Hillary stuff like he normally would. It was just brilliant. I had a great time. Now, they could have talked a little bit more about the drug war. That would have been nice. But we did hear from Hillary Clinton her rejection of the private prison industry and mass incarceration. So looks like we may have brought her around a little bit on that issue. We'll talk more about that in Hour 2, Toker Talk Radio. We'll take your calls as well at 650-LEGAL-MJ. That's 650-534-2565. But coming up in this hour, got all sorts of stuff to bring to you. At the end of this hour, we'll have a Reformers Reader segment. The Medical Marijuana Guidebook is out. Its author is David Downs, and he's the writer for the San Francisco Gate's Smell the Truth blog. He'll be joining us at the end of the hour to talk about the Medical Marijuana Guidebook and his thoughts on marijuana election night. Before that, we've got one of our marijuana election night preview segments to bring you. We'll be speaking with Michael Weiser. He is a candidate for the United States Congress from Arizona's 4th District, running as a Democrat. He is also the state director for Arizona NORML. So one of ours running for the federal Congress. We'll talk to him about that at 5:30. Also coming up on the show, some government at work for you as we continue to look at the marijuana election night coming up in November. Just 6 weeks from today, is it? I can't believe it's that close. NORML has issued its congressional scorecard rating the representatives and senators on their marijuana stand. So we'll get a look at that before you head to the ballot in November. Head to the polls in November, I should say, to cast your ballot. And then right after the Cannabis Radio News, we've got a special Reefer Madness Debunked segment. We've got the people from Pop Pot, parents opposed to Pot Pot. They are screaming about the connection between mental illness, violence, and marijuana. Particularly, they are blaming the Washington Mall shooting on the shooter's marijuana use. We'll debunk the hell out of that. Plus, in Hour 2, take your calls at 650-LEGAL-MJ. But first, we start with the Cannabis Radio News. In the headlines today, news from GW Pharmaceuticals, cancer research from Spain, Connecticut, Illinois, and Massachusetts medical marijuana, and a study on energy consumption in marijuana. Coming up.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Cannabis use isn't the only thing growing. So are we. Grow with us. CannabisRadio.com.
Play as Ted Growing, expelled botany sophomore and the biggest grower in town, only on Weed Firm Replanted. Available on the App Store and Google Play.
It's a lot of work being the biggest grower in town. Maintaining a room full of plants while dealing with a slew of eccentric customers? From a hardcore partier to the curious neighbor next door.
Is anybody home?
Help me expand my bud business by unlocking new strains, customizing my grow room, and completing challenges that you can't get enough of. Grow your empire so big you can see it from space. Low on funds? Don't worry. Weed Firm Replanted is free to download.
Download Weed Firm Replanted for free on the App Store and Google Play today. Get growing, Mr. Growing.
Previously on the Stoner Jesus Show.
We do have John McAfee. He's running for the Libertarian Party nomination for president. What makes someone like you want to take the reins of this?
We're so far behind, it's frightening. And in a cyber war, we can't hack into the Chinese. Back in 1979, they started building cyber defense systems. We didn't even think about it until 20 years ago. I see no candidates and certainly no one within government capable of dealing with this issue.
The Stoner Jesus Show, live Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Or find the Stoner Jesus Show podcast on demand at CannabisRadio.com and StonerJesus.net.
Peace, bitches.
You're not high. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Your grapefruits are no match for my Trump Towers.
Okay, maybe you're high, too.
When you are starting up a medical cannabis business, you want a fired-up lawyer who understands the needs of cannabis consumers. The Law Office of Lauren Vasquez is your fired-up lawyer for the cannabis industry. Visit her website, fireduplawyer.com, or call 1-855-MMJ-LAWS for more information. That's 855-665-5297 for Lauren Vasquez, your fired-up lawyer, or email fireduplawyer@gmail.com.
It's time for the Cannabis Radio News, covering the latest headlines in consumer cannabis, medical marijuana, and industrial hemp. Cannabis Radio News is now available exclusively at CannabisRadio.com. Now your marijuana headlines in 4 minutes and 20 seconds. This is Cannabis Radio News.
This is your Cannabis Radio News for Tuesday, September 27th, 2016. GW Pharmaceuticals has cleared another hurdle in gaining FDA approval for its drug called Epidiolex, boosting stock value for the British drug maker. Epidiolex is a cannabidiol tincture and designed for the treatment of childhood epilepsy. GW announced the findings from Phase 3 clinical trials showing Epidiolex treatments led to a 42% reduction in seizure activity compared to a 17% reduction for patients taking a placebo. Quote, the good news is this is actually the third positive trial that we have within the field of treatment-resistant childhood onset epilepsy that we have reported results for in the last 6 months, end quote, GW Pharma CEO Justin Gover told CNBC's Jim Cramer on Monday. GW expects to submit Epidiolex for FDA approval in early 2017. If approved, the 16 states with limited CBD-only medical marijuana laws could conceivably repeal those laws in favor of Epidiolex, which would be legal in all 50 states. Spanish researchers in Madrid have published data that suggest cannabis extracts are, quote, promising tools, end quote, in the treatment of prostate and breast cancer. The University of Madrid scientists studied the role of cannabidiol, the non-psychoactive marijuana component called CBD, on preventing the spread of these cancers that kill 40,000 women and afflict 180,000 men annually. They noted that cannabidiol was found to have, quote, direct anti-tumor effects, end quote, and helped conventional anti-tumor drugs to work more effectively. Their study adds to over 4 decades of research that finds cannabinoids to attack cancer cells without disrupting healthy ones. Starting October 1, Connecticut's Department of Consumer Protection is accepting applications for researchers to study medical marijuana. Legislators modified the state's 4-year-old medical marijuana law to allow hospitals, universities, growers, and dispensaries to study cannabis and cannabinoids. Part of the reform was to move cannabis to Schedule 2 in the state's controlled substances laws, which defines the herb as having recognized medical use in the state. The federal Schedule 1 designation still applies, which has impeded most cannabis research. However, an appropriations amendment currently forbids the federal government from prosecuting citizens and organizations acting in accordance with their state's medical marijuana law. DCP Commissioner Jonathan Harris states that, quote, Connecticut could become the focal point for medical cannabis research, end quote, thanks to the reforms. A doctor who recommends medical marijuana for patients in southern Illinois is facing a state and federal investigation. Dr. Bodo Schneider is responsible for writing the recommendations for nearly half of the state's 4,400 registered patients. Illinois' strict medical marijuana law requires a bona fide physician-patient relationship that isn't simply a patient walking in to get a medical marijuana recommendation. Investigators allege that the doctor's sheer volume of recommendations bring into question the legitimacy of the recommendations that cost his patients over $300 a year. Schneider counters that he requires multiple visits of patients before writing a recommendation and 6-month checkups to ensure continuation of a bona fide relationship. Schneider could lose his license over the allegations if proven true. He believes the state's governor is targeting his practice to thwart the expansion of Illinois' medical marijuana program. A spokesman for Governor Bruce Rauner denies the accusation. Meanwhile, in Massachusetts, a judge has decided that a medical marijuana doctor should not have had his license suspended by the state. Dr. John C. Nadolny, the medical director of Canacare Docs, was accused by Massachusetts Board of Registration in Medicine of improperly allowing nurse practitioners to write recommendations for thousands of patients at 8 clinic locations throughout the Commonwealth. Administrative Magistrate Kenneth Brethsler ruled Monday that Nadolny did no wrong in delegating the recommendation duties, since the nurse practitioners already had the, quote, independent authority to do so. Cannabis cultivation indoors in America could account for as much energy consumption as data centers in the country, according to a new report released by Berkeley. This has been your Cannabis Radio News for Tuesday, September 27th, 2016. I'm Russ Belville.
We don't limit how much you smoke, and we don't limit where you listen. Cannabis Radio is now on iTunes, Stitcher, and iHeartRadio.
Dr. Dabber, hurry! Its temperature is shooting past 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It's burning up.
I'm afraid for this little guy, it's just too late.
What caused the problem?
Only Dr. Dabber can maintain the perfect temperature for a smooth-tasting, slower burn. This standard vaporizer lost all of its health benefits, sending it up in smoke.
So you're telling me that most vapor pens burn so hot they produce smoke, not vapor?
Correct. Keep away from those standard vaporizer pens and turn to Dr. Dabber. Doctor's orders.
Less heat, more flavor.
Dear Mom, when I was in college, I used to drink a lot. It was kind of crazy. But now that I'm older, I prefer to use marijuana. It's less harmful to my body, I don't get hungover, and honestly, I feel safer around marijuana users. I hope this makes sense, but if not, let's talk. I love you.
You're not high. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
Okay, maybe you're high, too.
Marijuana legalization is a worldwide phenomenon. Get yourself positioned for the global cannabis marketplace by attending the International Cannabis Business Conference in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. You'll learn from established cannabis professionals, elected officials, and internationally recognized marijuana law reform activists. You'll also enjoy the ICBC's famous VIP party featuring ICBC special guest speaker and Canadian native Tommy Chong. The ICBC is happening in Vancouver on Thursday and Friday, October 13th and 14th at the Hyatt Regency. Log on to internationalcbc.com today to reserve your tickets. That's internationalcbc.com and bookmark our page for the next ICBCs taking place in Berlin, Germany and San Francisco, California. Don't miss the International Cannabis Business Conference, internationalcbc.com.
Marijuana is an addictive drug which produces in its users insanity, criminality, and death. Marijuana is the most violence-causing drug in the history of mankind. If the hideous monster Frankenstein came face-to-face with the monster of marijuana, he'd drop dead from fright.
You know, it's not easy countering 7 decades of propaganda in a 2-hour show, but let's try. It's time for the Russ Belville Show's Reefer Madness Debunked.
All right, welcome everybody. In our Reefer Madness Debunked today, we take a look at the website for the group called Parents Opposed to Pot. They call themselves Pop Pot, which is redundant. That would be Parents Opposed to Pot. But okay, Pop Pot. And they've got a website out there called StopPot2016.com. The founder of this group is called Roger Morgan, and he's an anti-drug activist. Carla Lowe, Scott Chipman, and Dr. Ron Allen are also involved. You may know Dr. Ron. He's the African-American reverend who was vocal in the anti-legalization movement. And on their website, they have published a piece entitled Washington Shooter Had a Marijuana History. And it's the latest of these scaremongering pieces with zero basis in science to scare the parents out there, scare the voters into rejecting marijuana legalization. And this tactic is one of the most disgusting and disturbing developments in the anti-legalization movement. It's one that we first saw rear its ugly head in the form of Christine Tatum, the Denver-based journalist who is married to Dr. Christian Thurstone, a major state drug rehabber who is a founding board member of Kevin Sabet's Project Sam. Christine Tatum was awfully fond of noting how whenever there was a shooting or a terrorist attack, that the person involved in it had a history of using marijuana. She gained my attention when the Boston Marathon bombing happened, and she called out the Tsarnaev brothers for their history of marijuana use, claiming that marijuana is what's driving people to go insane, to go psycho, and want to shoot places up or blow up road races and so forth. Well, this meme is developing within the anti-legalization community, although the mainstreamers won't touch it. Kevin Sabet won't touch it. Most of the guys with some sense won't touch this one because there's just no solid scientific backing for it. And it dredges up the old reefer madness, going to become an axe murderer type of framing that they're desperately trying to distance themselves from. But not the pop pot people. According to their story here, they say that cannabis use is always relevant in cases of mental imbalance. If someone's got a mental problem, then their cannabis use, you have to be able to call that up and be able to blame it. This is the Burlington Mall shooting that happened. 5 people were killed by 20-year-old Arkan Seaton, who took a gun and just started shooting people in the mall. Now, his record shows that he's been arrested, 3 charges of domestic violence, and drunk driving. The Seattle Times reports that he was homeless when he was in high school, and they report that he was undergoing mental health evaluations involved in a misdemeanor that he committed. And then they asked about his cannabis use, and they note that he was a cannabis user, but that the judge and the system did not note that in this case. Well, listen, pop pot people, you keep trying to connect marijuana to these violent acts. I'd ask you to take a look at whether these people were frequent consumers of alcohol or caffeine, or most particularly the antidepressant drugs that we've seen in the shooters and the terrorists in recent cases. Correlation does not imply causation. These people may have mental problems in the first place, and the only reason they're using marijuana is to mitigate the symptoms that are causing them so much problems. We don't know how much more violent these guys might have been without their marijuana. It's a disgusting, disgusting tactic, and we really need to call these people out on it. Absolutely.
Denial ain't just the river in Egypt.
That sound means it's 20 after, and that means it's 4:20 in the Mountain Time Zone. Happy 4:20 to our friends in the Rockies. We got to take a break. Our union-mandated safety briefing is happening. And when we return, we'll talk about NORML's congressional scorecard. How did your representatives stack up? We'll find out right after this.
Maui Wowie, Acapulco Gold, California Kush. Our strains stretch everywhere too. This is the Cannabis Radio Network. Cash?
Sorry.
I don't carry around cash, and I don't want to use the ATM and pay surcharges.
You don't need to carry cash. Haven't you heard about PayQuick?
Okay, tell me about PayQuick.
It's the safe and easy way to pay. It works just like your debit card to securely pay for your purchase, and it gives you rewards points every time you use it.
Nice.
PayQuick, the safe and easy way to pay. PayQuick.com.
We love the earth.
I'm Radical Russ Belville, inviting you to join me every weekday on CannabisRadio.com for the Russ Belville Show. It's the NPR of POT. We bring you the latest marijuana headlines, cannabis analysis, drug war data, activist interviews, radical rants, and your live calls. Join me every weekday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, live only on CannabisRadio.com.
You're listening to the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com, where we don't change our mind on decriminalization during an election year.
Coming soon to a city near you, Cannabis Finance Boot Camp. Get all your cannabis accounting, legal, and compliance questions answered by their knowledgeable panel of industry experts who want to help your cannabis boom. Whether you're a grower, dispensary operator, or a newcomer to the field, your cannabis needs Cannabis Finance Boot Camp. For information on upcoming events, visit CannabisFinanceBootCamp.com. Reforming America's marijuana prohibition laws takes education, lobbying, and voting. From Washington, D.C. to your state capital to your city hall, marijuana law reform involves all levels of civic life. Learn how you can make your impact with elected officials as we take a look at our government at work. Today in Government at Work, we take a look at the latest contribution by NORML's Deputy Director, Paul Armentano. It's listed up at thehill.com, the blog for Congress, and it's entitled Congress Out of Step with Nation on Marijuana Laws. And it refers to NORML's production of the Congressional Scorecard. NORML's Congressional Scorecard grades the members of the United States House and the Senate on a typical letter grade from A to F, where A, of course, is the people that are publicly supporting the regulating of marijuana for adults. You get a letter B grade if you support medical marijuana. You get a letter C if you're a states' rights person. You get a letter D if you haven't expressed any support for marijuana law reform, and an F if you are a vocal opponent of marijuana law reform. A for legalization, B for medical, C for states' rights, D for no opinion, and F for prohibition. Now, the grading is based on the Congress members' 2015 and 2016 voting records and public statements, their sponsorship or co-sponsorship of marijuana legislation, and sponsorship or co-sponsorship of budgetary amendments regarding marijuana. And what we find statistically here of our Congress is that of the 535 members, there's 435 representatives, 100 senators, 330 of the members, 62% of them, get a passing grade of C or higher. So more than half of our Congress is at least at the level of allowing the states to move forward with reform without interference from the federal government. Of those 330, there are just 22 that get an A. 22 representatives and senators, 20 reps, 2 senators, get an A for their vocal support of marijuana legalization. 254 members get a B for their support of medical marijuana. We find that of the 233 Democrats in Congress, 92% of them get a passing grade. Of the 302 Republicans, 37% of them get a passing grade. I always like to bring this up because when the elections come around, within the cannabis community, there are people that kind of have an anti-government, anti-authority attitude, and they'll say, it doesn't matter. They're all the same. There's not a lick of difference between the two of them. And maybe that's true on some other issues. Maybe that's true with respect to plutocracy and corruption, all those kind of things. But if we're just going to limit it to their stand on marijuana and whether or not we are going to move forward with reform, the Democratic Party is certainly more on our side, generally speaking, than the Republican Party. That's just based on these statistics. Now, the congressional scorecard is available at the NORML website, and you can find out more information there. There's also very interesting data to be mined based on the responses here. Americans in the last few polls, last 10 of them, support marijuana legalization. We got 58% in some of the latest polls, 55% in some of the polls. So well over half of Americans support legalization, yet only 4% of their elected representatives in Congress support legalization. So we get 4% compared to the 58% they represent. And we see a similar breakdown when it comes to medical cannabis policy. You get about 51% of the Congress that supports medical marijuana. So that's good. We got a majority of Congress finally on board with medical marijuana after 20 years. But the support for medical marijuana among the public is well into the 70 and 80% range. It is difficult to find any other issue where the American people are so much more in support of the issue than the elected officials that represent them. Numerous studies have shown that what the people want, however, isn't how Congress people dictate their actions. It's what the elite 1% want. This isn't just some Occupy Wall Street ranting. This is actual social science, social surveys that have shown that the will of the voters, their public opinion on issues, has a statistically insignificant effect on the voting patterns of Congress. But people whose incomes are within the top 1%, how they feel about issues has a great effect on whether or not bills get introduced, passed, and become law in this country. So it would stand to reason that we, the people, the public that is so greatly in support of marijuana legalization and medical marijuana, simply lack the big money to make that view important to our Congress critters. No, it's the big view of CEOs of pharmaceutical companies and alcohol brewers and people that own stock in private prisons and drug testing and rehabs. Those people who see the threat to their bottom line are the ones who have the ear of our representatives and our senators. But as marijuana legalization continues to sweep across this nation, and we continue to build more vibrant and growing enterprises in the states that legalize medical and recreational cannabis, we will have that money as a lobby, as a constituency. We will have that influence to start affecting the senators and the representatives. It's only a matter of time, and we can do what we can do to hasten the approach of that day when our Congress finally gets behind marijuana reform to the level we do. Call your congressman, call your senators, 202-483-0000, I think. Now look it up. Look up the phone number for the Congress. Call your congressman.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
How high do you like your profit margin? CannabisRadio.com.
Oh, let the marijuana llama tell you something now about a game for your phone gonna make you say, wow! The game's about the game of growing cannabis for cash. Grow the seed, sell the bud, put the savings in the stash. Little by little, your empire grows large. Put different celebrities inside your entourage. You can choose to play with Snoop or me or Cheech and Chong, Cypress Hill, Willie Nelson, Wiz Khalifa with a bong. The name of the game is Hemp Inc., that's the point. Download and play while you light yourself a joint. The business of cannabis should be no crime. Hemp Inc. is even hot-proofed by the man who run High Times. Oh yeah? Get it on Android and iOS today. Marijuana llama out. Got to tend to me own crops, you know. Money don't make itself. Hemp Inc.
Not enough money for schools.
Since we made marijuana legal, our schools are better and our kids have more opportunities.
Crowded courts mean police cannot protect our streets.
The great thing is that here in Colorado, law enforcement is able to focus on the number one priority for all of us, which is preventing violent crime.
Never enough money.
Since the passage of Amendment 64, I have seen an increase in resources for our schools.
It's your turn to regulate marijuana.
Get the latest updates on the Russ Belville Show by following Radical Russ on Twitter and liking the Russ Belville Show on Facebook.
Marijuana legalization is a worldwide phenomenon. Get yourself positioned for the global cannabis marketplace by attending the International Cannabis Business Conference in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. You'll learn from established cannabis professionals, elected officials, and internationally recognized marijuana law reform activists. You'll also enjoy the ICBC's famous VIP party featuring ICBC special guest speaker and Canadian native Tommy Chong. The ICBC is happening in Vancouver on Thursday and Friday, October 13th and 14th at the Hyatt Regency. Log on to internationalcbc.com today to reserve your tickets. That's internationalcbc.com and bookmark our page for the next ICBCs taking place in Berlin, Germany and San Francisco, California. Don't miss the International Cannabis Business Conference, internationalcbc.com.
You're listening to Cannabis Radio News' exclusive coverage of Vote 2016, The Path to Cannabis Freedom, only on CannabisRadio.com.
Welcome back, everyone. In our continuing coverage of the most pivotal election for marijuana reform in my lifetime, we are interviewing some of the candidates who are running for office, in particular, candidates who have a history of not just supporting marijuana reform, but actually walking the walk, doing the activism work themselves to ensure that we can help end adult marijuana prohibition. Joining us to discuss this is a candidate for the United States Congress coming out of Arizona's 4th District, running as a Democrat. His name is Michael Weiser, and Michael, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you very much. I'm excited to be here. I just came back from putting up signage out in the country, so
that's good news.
Good
now,
to be sitting still and inside.
That's right. Now, Michael, your background in reform is with Arizona NORML. Tell folks how you've been involved.
Well, I grew up in a drug importing part of the United States, the lower Rio Grande Valley of Texas. During the 70s and 80s, that was a major importation point for marijuana. And so I was steeped in that culture, from teenagehood on. And when I got to Arizona, I was already a cannabis user. In 2010, my wife ran for state senate, and she came out in favor of legalization, and she wasn't a cannabis user. And I said, if she's got the balls to do that, I can certainly stand up for it myself. The next year, I was one of the leaders in our local Occupy. I was asked to run for Congress. The Democratic Party said that they needed a candidate. So off I went on this adventure. One of the first steps was to get a medical card. And yeah, 3 years later, NORML asked me to be the state director. It was a hell of a 3 years, by the way.
Oh, that's fantastic. Sorry about that. I had a disconnection here on the on my side. So you've been involved here with marijuana reform, and you're running as a Democrat in Arizona's 4th District for U.S. Congress. Yeah. What's the district like? How do they? What's the area there in Arizona, and how do they respond to your candidacy?
Well, Arizona added Congressional District 4 in 2012 after the census to address what life is like for people in the rural parts of Arizona, especially along the Colorado River. So the district is about a third of the land area of the state. It's all the Colorado River, the western parts, the exurbs around Phoenix. It's not the most conservative congressional district in the state. It's pretty far there.
Yeah.
It's like... yeah, they do a pretty good job of being conservative around here. However, the thing about Arizona and the thing about cannabis is cannabis does cross the voter lines. Like, the Republican Party is not working for marijuana in any way whatsoever, but there's a lot of Republicans that are smokers. And through my work within the party and, the help of lots of others, in 2014, we got the party to endorse legalization. And then we repeated that fact when Prop 205 was filed. And nationally, I was part of the Bernie delegates that helped push the national platform to promote legalization. So it's been, like I said, since 2010 of working on expanding this. But now we have the strength of the entire Democratic Party in Arizona pushing for Prop 205 and an end of the drug war.
That's fantastic news. We're speaking with Michael Weiser, running for U.S. Congress from Arizona's District 4. And Michael, is there an incumbent in that seat currently? Is it a Republican you're running against?
Oh, you betcha. Not just an incumbent, but a jolly prohibitionist incumbent. A guy named Paul Gosar. He's a dentist originally from Wyoming. Lives in Flagstaff, which isn't in the district, but that's how that goes sometimes. And he has introduced anti-medical card legislation at the federal level. In fact, one of his pieces was an attempt to stop federal benefits to anyone with a medical card.
Oh. Wow. So
it's about as draconian as you can get, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Cut you off if you're using medicine in a state that allows it. Yeah, gotcha.
Right. And just to keep in mind, when I say as draconian as we can get, last week we had a man in North Carolina shot to death as punishment for smoking marijuana. Keith Lamont Scott, the cops were looking for somebody else in the parking lot, and they saw him smoking a blunt and came over and ultimately shot him to death. And that's how serious our drug laws are. So,
yeah, absolutely.
It is imperative that we end this civil rights abuse. And that's kind of what inspired me. I'd been a social studies teacher, a political writer. I call myself a humorist. Sometimes people laugh at my columns. At least they were publishing them. And all of that was pretty good, but it wasn't having the impact that I felt we needed. And there's no single social issue with the transformative power of ending cannabis prohibition. There's nothing else we could work on right now that can change America as profoundly, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Now, you're running against a Republican incumbent who is a dyed-in-the-wool prohibitionist, a drug warrior. You, of course, are quite the outspoken legalizer and reformer. How is the race shaping up? Do the people of the 4th District, are they ready to reject this guy in favor of reform?
I signed up for the long game when they asked me to run in 12. I committed to at least 3 election cycles, and it may take more than this. But we've gained significantly between the 14 and the 16 cycle. We have a 25% increase in our share of the vote. I'm still the underdog in the general election, but more importantly, my main campaign issue is legalization. And here in Arizona, we have Prop 205, which I had helped author when I was a political director of a former organization, Safer Arizona. I take a lot of pride in what we've accomplished at writing a tax and regulation structure that can do significant changes to the drug war here in Arizona. That said, I've been using my campaign to make sure that we have legalization in the state. That's my main thrust. So that race, actually, that's a toss-up right now. We have the upper hand in the polling, but it's a narrow upper hand. So I'm putting all my reserves and my energies into supporting Prop 205 through my massive congressional district.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Arizona initiative, the Prop 205 of the polling I've seen is sitting at, 50 to 43, 50 to 40, something like that?
Yes, with the remainder being undecided. And in this state, we have a couple of different challenges. The Prosecuting Attorneys Association are the head of a PAC that is working against legalization. So, law enforcement structure and the governor, who is a right-wing conservative, social conservative, Doug Ducey. Mm-hmm. And then at the other end of the spectrum, we have a revival of a California organization, Stoners Against Legalization, that have been fighting me tooth and nail ever since we got the Prop 205 filed in April of 15. I don't know why they're so committed to preserving the underground economy, but they sure are.
I've generally found that people that oppose marijuana reform have a financial interest in the status quo, but that's just speculation on my part.
Right. Yeah.
Now, Michael, is there are they making any headway, these stoners against legalization in Arizona? What I've seen some of Ray Stern's reporting on it, but are they making a splash, or is this just kind of a tempest in a teapot?
Well, for the first year, they had the upper hand in the cannabis community. They introduced an initiative that I unfortunately had been part of the drafting process on as well, back when we were trying to set up, our negotiations with MPP. We wrote an initiative that we thought was going to be really solid, and then that got polished through several cycles and became this other initiative. For a year, they dominated the social circle with that initiative, and then June 1st, 2016, a month before the filing, their campaign manager pulls the plug in a very shady way. There's a lot of recrimination in their community that he had been a setup and they had been duped. They lost a lot of respectability. They've continued to try to function, but his leadership is floundering, and we're hoping that, coming out with true perspectives on some of the propagandas they've been putting out against Prop 205 will inform the educated cannabis voter in Arizona, because that's the kind of people that I know are going to make or break this election.
Absolutely. Well, Michael, we appreciate you standing up for cannabis legalization in Arizona and taking that fight to the U.S. Congress. Give people real quick any website or contact info they need to be able to help you out. Yeah.
So in addition to being a congressional candidate at MikelWeisser.org, that's michaelweiser.org, I'm also the state director of NORML here in Arizona. That's ArizonaNORML.org. So either of those websites would be a great way to learn more about our work. for people in the Southwest. Our organization is one of the lead organizers of the upcoming Southwest Cannabis Conference, October 14th through 16th, and I'll hope to see you there.
All right,
This is
thank
the
you.
Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Thank you, Michael Weiser. Good luck in your congressional race.
Seed to sale, clicks to conversions, and more. You're listening to the Cannabis Radio Network.
Play as Ted Growing, expelled botany sophomore and the biggest grower in town, only on Weed Firm Replanted. Available on the App Store and Google Play.
It's a lot of work being the biggest grower in town. Maintaining a room full of plants while dealing with a slew of eccentric customers? From a hardcore partier to the curious neighbor next door.
Is anybody home?
Help me expand my bud business by unlocking new strains, customizing my grow room, and completing challenges that you can't get enough of. Grow your empire so big you can see it from space. Low on funds? Don't worry. Weed Firm Replanted is free to download.
Download Weed Firm Replanted for free on the App Store and Google Play today. Get growing, Mr. Growing.
Cannabis Confidential with Dr. Dina. Candid.
I want to give you the inside story.
Captivating.
I want to introduce you to my kind and amazingly talented friends.
Compelling.
We get to meet some of the most amazing cannabis activists and warriors around.
Listen in as medical marijuana pioneer Dr. Dina shares never-before-heard stories, chats with cannabis insiders and celebrity friends, and provides invaluable perspective and insight into one of the fastest-growing industries in the world.
I want to share with you what was once confidential information. Let's expose the truth, discuss the issues, and learn the facts.
Cannabis Confidential, only on CannabisRadio.com.
You're not high. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
I opted for convenience to use my personal email account.
Okay, maybe you're high, too.
The Russ Belville Show is proudly sponsored by the Marijuana Business Association. The MJBA, called by NBC News the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce, is the fastest growing business association in the fastest growing industry in America. I've been working with the MJBA for years, and I personally invite you to join the MJBA. MJBA also publishes the popular MJ Headline News on Facebook and the MJNewsNetwork.com and Marijuana Channel 1 on YouTube. Visit mjba.net for more details.
The best weapon you can have in the Prohibition War is your mind. Fill your head with the knowledge you need by checking out this latest entry in the Russ Belville Show's Reformer's Reader.
Welcome back, everyone. In today's Reformer's Reader, we're visiting with a great activist there in Northern California and a great writer who's been bringing you so much of the information you read online about the ongoing war to end marijuana prohibition. We've got David Downs from the San Francisco Gate's Smell the Truth column joining us. And David, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Russ. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad to have you here because I got a notice from your publicist that you've got a new book out, the Medical Marijuana Guidebook, and I was hoping you could tell our listeners a little bit about it.
Sure, Russ. I've been doing this column called Legalization Nation in the East Bay Express since 2009. And ever since we started reporting this professional journalistic, enterprise, we've received tons of calls and emails and personal requests to provide basic information on medical marijuana. And it goes something like this. My doctor recommended medical marijuana for my partner or my, spouse. But that's all the doctor would say. He just zipped his lips and he wouldn't tell me. He wouldn't give me a recommendation. He wouldn't tell me where to go or what to do. And America has millions of basic questions about how to safely and legally access medical cannabis in the now 35 states that it's legal. And so I thought I wanted to put together a handbook or a guidebook for patients and their caregivers to take these basic steps. And it's a combination of the DMV, where you got papers to fill out, and then a little bit of Yelp, where you have to cast about and find good places, find good products, and try to use them safely. And I ran the idea by patients. They were super stoked on it. They said, David, you have to do this book. And then a publisher came along and was looking for book ideas. And I said, I'm going to write this anyway. If you guys want to take a crack at it, they said, we'd love it. give it to us, get us out, we want to get it out. And so now it's hitting the shelves nationally at places like Barnes & Noble and Amazon and all over the place.
Wow, that's fantastic information for people to get their hands on, not just why cannabis works, what it's good for, but also the nuts and bolts of how do you actually follow these laws. Do you have I imagine you break down kind of what the differences are between, say, California with pretty wide open and home growing versus, say, a Minnesota where you can't even get the plant. Is there like a table or something like that in there?
Exactly. This is the first book, as far as I know, to put things together the way the patients have to every day, between the legal aspect and then the usage aspect. And there's a section 3 of the book goes through each state and tells you how to get legal in each of those states. And doing that research, you quickly learn that there's easy access states like California, and then there's states that have access only in name. And I'm talking about the usual bad actors down in the South, like the Georgias and the Floridas of the world, places that have a CBD law, but access for all intents and purposes is impossible. And so I rate each state according to the ease of access, from easy to medium to hard to next to impossible.
Okay. And for the reader there that's picking up the Medical Marijuana Guidebook, what are some of the misconceptions, one of the common things that you find patients misunderstand that the book helps to clear up?
Well, there's so many different types of people in the world interested in medical marijuana, and they're at such different spots along the learning curve. So you have some people who are already believers, and they just need some studies to back up what they know to be true, which is that medical marijuana works for, say, their Crohn's disease. And they want to get their primary physician to give them a recommendation so they can bring the book in, point to the part of the endnotes that talks about the studies covering Crohn's disease and go, look, I'm not crazy. This is working. This is the studies to prove it. You as a doctor, you have, according to your Hippocratic oath, you have to study up on this. And doctors aren't learning about this in the United States.
That's true. We see the estimate I hear is that only 14% of the doctors' medical schools actually discuss the endocannabinoid system. And try to imagine going to a mechanic if only 1 out of 7 had been told what the transmission system is.
Yeah, and I talk to wholly different communities. The only a small percentage of Americans have any experience with medical marijuana or dispensaries. The vast majority of them, they're like black box facilities for them, and they don't know anything. And so when I meet with them at places like Commonwealth clubs and other sort of community talks, they have some of the most basic and best questions you can imagine. I've sat down with 80-year-old ladies with arthritis that ask me, David, what is one dose of cannabis? Or how can I get addicted? Is it addictive? Or can I overdose? And I feel like maybe a lot of insiders might chuckle, but that's really the state of knowledge in America about this plant and about this science, is they're looking for the basics. And these basics really are just a Google search away. But the problem is they don't know what to search or where to search for, and they don't know who to trust. And so I wanted to create a book that rounded up all the information for them and gave them the valid sources, so they felt like they had some firm ground underneath them to go forward.
So this is something you might be able to get for, say, an older relative, grandma, grandpa, aunt, uncle, who is curious about how medical cannabis could help them, but such a noob that they would still need to know, have explicit instructions on how to, say, run a vaporizer or what to worry about when eating a cookie. So it's kind of, you can get down to the really basic level if you need to with this book. Is that right?
Precisely. My uncle is an insomniac. He hasn't slept in decades, and he came out to California for a visit. He got access to some tincture, and he slept for the first night in decades. And his wife, poor thing, she wrote me being like, this has changed the game for us. We need to fully get up to speed. Crap, we're moving to Colorado just so we have the civil liberties to treat his health problems the way we need to treat them. It's for new bud tenders who should know this stuff before they serve a patient. It's for policymakers who should know this stuff before they write a law. It's for your grandma, your grandpa, your auntie. I tell people, do you know someone in your life who could be saved or benefited by medical marijuana? And almost everyone says yes. And I go, well, then this is the book for them because, again, you have the knowledge. This is a way to pass it on systematically, and it might be a good Christmas gift to boot.
The book is called the Medical Marijuana Guidebook. David Downs is the author. Check out Barnes & Noble and other booksellers for information. Is there a Facebook or a website for the book that people could look up?
Definitely. You know, one of the big things about America and medical marijuana right now is that the laws are changing fast. The science is rapidly advancing. We thought of this. We have a website called at www.usmmj.org, like United States Medical Marijuana.org. And USMMJ is where you can go and purchase the book direct from me. I'm retailing it. That means I get to keep the margins. You get to support the author. I will personally address the book to you, sign it, and put it in the mail to you. You can just buy directly on the site at usmmj.org. That site also includes links to other places where you could buy it, whether it's Amazon or Whitman. And that site is where updated information is going to be going for the book. For anybody who owns the book and wants to stay abreast of changes. So we have an Ohio page we got to roll out. We have a Pennsylvania page we have to roll out. We have to update the California page. And we're going to keep updating the website and then reverse publish back into print every couple of years.
Great idea. So much is changing so rapidly, and you're right there in the heart of it in the Bay Area of California as Prop 64 is on the ballot, and people are excited all around the world for the possibility of California passing legalization. There's also been the change in the medical marijuana regulations there, and I understand there's a ton of things on local ballots as far as bans and taxes and so forth. Are you beginning to feel overwhelmed? What's your take on this election cycle just 6 weeks out from the biggest marijuana vote in the world?
Russ, it's no sleep till election day and probably a few days afterwards. We're really in the grind here. I just got my official voter information guide in the mail. It's thicker than my book. It's thicker than most magazines. You know, this whole direct democracy thing has really gone to the next level with initiatives in California. Everyone gets to sharpen their pencil and play armchair regulator, armchair policymaker, armchair criminal defense attorney, and go through these initiatives. Prop 64 is here and it's real. It's in the voter guide, and there's certainly some opposition arguments which aren't true. And we're promised to have a real heated, lengthy debate for the next 40 or so days until voters go to the polls on this. It's polling at around 60%, which sounds good, but every reformer I talk to say complacency has become the number one enemy of reform in California. If the kids don't show up, if the adults don't tell their friends to vote on this, it could very well easily fail, and fail by a narrow margin on Election Day, which is November 8th. And registration ends, for voting this October. So kids who are in college need to register in their hometown, register in their college town, and so on and so forth, so that their voice is heard on the matter. I recently spoke to rapper Wiz Khalifa, who lives in Los Angeles with his boy, and he supports Prop 64. He said he supports the 1 ounce limit in public. He said, that's enough. And I was like, okay, well, are you voting this year? He said, nah, I'm not going to vote. And I said, why? I mean, you have a chance to, make your opinion known. And he said something along the lines of, whoever's going to get in office, they're going to legalize it either way, so I don't need to vote. And I think that's a real danger. That thought out there is very common in reform communities. We're sitting on our laurels and feeling pretty good about ourselves, and this thing could easily swing back, and we could be starting down a whole new path.
Absolutely right. Don't take it for granted, folks. Make sure you check out your registration. You can go to usa.vote.gov, and they've got links to all 50 states to check your registration. You can't over-register. If you're not sure, go do it anyway, right? Can't over-register, and you want to make sure that you take part in this Marijuana Election Night 2016. David Downs from Legalization Nation, Smell the Truth, working out there in the Bay. The book is called The Medical Marijuana Guidebook, and you can find out more at usmmj.org. Buy it directly from David and help him make a buck. David, thanks for joining us here on the show today. Good luck with the book, and especially good luck in the election.
Thanks so much, Radical Russ, and thank you to readers and listeners. I appreciate your time. You guys all take care.
And that's all the time we got for our first hour here, but stay tuned. Hour 2 is coming up. Toker Talk Radio. We'll take your calls at 650-LEGAL-MJ. That's 650-534-2565. We'll be taking a look at Croptober coming up here at the end of this week here in Oregon. It begins, and on October 1st, new rules go into effect that could throw a monkey wrench into our fledgling marijuana program. For everyone here at CannabisRadio.com, I'm Radical Russ. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at RadicalRuss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth.